Vince, why is Lee Anderson not allowed to discuss what is concerning so many people in his own country?
Well, I think he is allowed to discuss it, but what he has to do is use the right words.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to make some really offensive and quite inflammatory statements about the Mayor of London, then you have to expect some pushback on this, because it is quite offensive to suggest that the Mayor of London is owned by Islamist mates. I think that anybody could see that, and it's going to just ruin the discussion that we need to have in this country regarding some of the fundamentalists that are out there on the streets.
And I think it was Dave just made the point. It was the week where they announced that Islamophobic, instances were on the rise. Yeah. And James, I think Claire's right. You can have the conversation, but you have to have it in the right way.
Well, it shouldn't be that hard. You know, it should be perfectly possible to call out Islamic extremism without resorting to tarring the Mayor of London, who's a moderate mainstream Muslim, like millions of others in this country, with being an Islamist or somehow being in hock with Islamists. I think what's interesting is that Oliver Dowden, Deputy Prime Minister yesterday, refused to be drawn on whether he thought Lee Anderson's comments were Islamophobic. So I think there are still questions for the Conservative Party here.
And it also suggests, James, that the door is open for Lee Anderson to rejoin the party.
Yes, I mean, he was asked that. He said, look, if Lee Anderson did apologise, he's refused so far. He's seemed pretty unrepentant, but were he to change his tune, would he be allowed back into the Conservative Party? And Oliver Dowden kind of fudged his response, so we're unclear on that. I mean, the Telegraph reporting this morning, for example, that some Red Wall MPs have had messages from constituents over the weekend saying, look, we actually sympathise with Lee Anderson. And we know that...
And therein lies the whole issue for Rishi Sunak, who wanted the damn job and is now yet again experiencing the incredible difficulty of not being to the side, being in the main job collect. Because absolutely, James makes a very salient point. Hundreds of Tory MPs in the Red Wall area have received supportive messages saying that they agree with the sentiment, maybe not the way it was spoken. You've got Rishi Sunak being told by Labour it's racist and the language is wrong, you can't let him back in. Yet another position where he probably doesn't know the best way to turn, right?
But it is really difficult because there will be lots of other MPs who are receiving messages on the other side of the
Absolutely.
argument. So Rishi Sunak has an impossible job, and any Prime Minister has an impossible job, and keeping control of the Conservative Party was never going to be easy. It is always going to be, I suppose, a broken vessel at the moment. It has been for the last 3 or 4 years. But there are MPs, certainly in the South and the South West, who have had messages saying, do not allow that man back in, he doesn't speak for us. So what do you do with that piece of information?
Well, should we hear what the Prime Minister did do? His statement, they said over the weekend, our democracy cannot and must not bend to the threat of violence and intimidation or fall into polarised camps who hate each other. I mean, James, are we going to hear something more strident from the Prime Minister saying, look, I want to call out Islamophobia, or is he going to risk alienating other parts of his party?
Well, I wonder if we might hear something. I mean, he's in quite a unique position, being Britain's first non-white Prime Minister. I wonder whether he may use this opportunity to come out and say something and talk more specifically about Islamophobia. However, he's also very sensitive to those messages that Conservative MPs will have had from constituents over the weekend saying we agree with the sentiment. And the other issue is, if you're seen to hang out Lee Anderson to dry, questions are going to be raised of other Conservative MPs. Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak's predecessor, was in America last week appearing with far-right agitator Steve Bannon and refused to disagree when he labelled Toby Robinson a hero. So there are questions more broadly if you do go after Lee Anderson too much.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that whole Lee Anderson thing? I mean, I was pretty gobsmacked when they made him deputy chair of the Conservative Party some months ago. Quite an outspoken firebrand. The fact of the matter is, whether people like it or not, Boris Johnson won the last election because of those Red Wall seats. And to me, this is another example of Sunak's absolute weakness. He wanted the job and thought it was going to be very simple. The Tory party is in a far worse place than it ever was under even Johnson. Listen to Cyrus. The Tories seem absolutely obsessed in creating their own self-destruction. The quicker they are out, the better. And most people would look at it and go, yet another example. But I like what you said, James, because we now live in a world where... Listen, any racism, I said it last week, is fundamentally wrong. Islamophobia is wrong, anti-Semitism is wrong. But last week, Tower Bridge was blocked by fanatics. Fanatics outside the Houses of Parliament. I don't know what the guy's name, he gave he was the leader of some group, and he said, our aim is to lock down Parliament. And so we should never, as you quite rightly said, assume that every single Jewish person or every single Muslim is extremist. But there are those elements. And what this does is it moves us away from being able to have a debate about how we deal with those extremists on whatever side they come from, right?
Well, this is why the language is important, because you should be free to call out extremists of any religion.
But are you? Not if you're Charlotte Church.
Absolutely, you are free to call out, but it's about using appropriate language.
Yeah, I agree.
Being sensitive to what language is being used.
I just, on that point, and Claire, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective. The Prime Minister's in the past been able to use people like Suella Braverman to say the more extreme things that sort of panders to that further right side of the party, but we know that Suella Braverman became unstuck. Maybe the same thing is happening with Lee Anderson, you know, to make Vince's point to the Conservative Party sort of tying themselves up in knots. The Prime Minister doesn't want to say those things, but maybe he wants allies on his side, like Lee Anderson or Suella Braverman, to say the difficult things. So there is a part of the party that people feel like they've been represented.
Rosie, that's great, but the problem is he then sacks them. So then he looks completely
because they go too far.
But is that the case? Did he not want Suella Braverman to do his dirty work? He did a deal with Suella Braverman. It bit him on the backside.
See, I don't think he does. I don't think he wants it to go that far.
Well, then he needs to stand up and say what he thinks.
I don't disagree with you on that.
I agree with James.
I really think that there needs to be a proper conversation in the House of Commons regarding what is happening on the streets of London, because you're right. Blocking Tower Bridge with that kind of dispute, no, you shouldn't do that. But it is also a matter for the police. Why aren't the police dealing with the crimes that are happening out there? If you've got anti-Semitic chants, you've got things being projected onto the side of the Houses of Parliament, that is a matter for the police, and they need to be held to account.
They won't do anything because, you know, people say, oh, they're too woke, the police. Well, it's about the statute book as well, but we seem to be in an environment where there's nothing wrong with protesting. But extremism has no place in this country. And if we're too frightened to say that because we fear we might sound anti-Jewish or anti-Muslim or anti-what, that's not the point. The point is there shouldn't be people baying outside Parliament saying close Parliament down. This is a damn democracy. Cheryl makes the point. If Anderson's constituents don't like his comments, then surely they can kick him out. That's the truth, right?
Yes, but he also has a responsibility, given that he is a member of a political party, he is a member of the governing party, he's an elected representative. It comes with responsibility. And I know an awful lot is said about, well, it's free speech, it's opinion, he's allowed to have it. Yeah, but there are consequences, as we all know, to what you say, and he should be held to a higher account than some other people.
Did you see Farage came out straight away and said maybe you should join the Reform Party, and then Richard Tice said, I think you'll find I'm in charge of the Reform Party, which was quite shocking for Ticey. But yeah, I mean, are you going to look at these Red Wall MPs, these Tory MPs, the firebrands, the people with opinions that many people share, not the language before somebody complains? Are they all going to move towards the Reform Party? Is that what we're looking like?
Well, the awkward truth is, for the Conservative Party, that coalition they managed to pull off in 2019 of marrying traditional Conservative voters with Red Wall defectors is breaking up. And they have to choose which one are they going for. They're going